Today, we're diving into a really fiery critique of an international legal case. The whole argument is built around one single, provocative idea that the very process of justice has been flipped completely on its head. Let's get right into it. So, this is it. This is the sentence that kicks the whole thing off. The author is saying this is a total reversal of how justice is supposed to work. So, the big question for us is what in the world is inverted due process? All right. First up, a startling accusation. Let's really lay out the core claim that's at the heart of all this. Okay, so the argument starts here. The source is claiming that the ICC has detained former Philippine head of state Rodrigo Duterte before they even finished building their case. The author points out that, the court is still out there publicly looking for evidence, and at the exact same time, its actual authority, its jurisdiction, is being legally challenged. For the author, this sequence is just completely backward. So, Section 2, the standard for justice. Look, to really get what the author means by inverted, we first have to understand what they consider normal, right? What does a standard, by-the-book legal process actually look like from their point of view? And here you can really see the contrast they're drawing. The standard process, according to them, is pretty straightforward. You build a solid, tested case, and if you have one, detention is the consequence. But they're arguing the ICC is doing the exact opposite. Detain the target first, and then start crowdsourcing evidence to try and justify it after the fact. Which brings us to Section 3, a process in reverse. This is where the author really breaks down the step-by-step process that they find so troubling. So, for the author, the sequence is everything. They claim the process is basically detain first, figure out the evidence later, and then, maybe clarify if you even have the legal authority to do any of it. From this perspective, detention isn't the final result of an investigation. It's the tool being used to kick one off. This quote right here really just captures the author's frustration perfectly. Evidence fishing with handcuffs. It's this powerful image they use for a process they believe is happening in reverse, searching for a crime only after you've already locked someone up. So if you boil it all down, the author's entire argument really rests on these three fundamental objections. First, they say there's no settled legal jurisdiction. Second, there's no fully tested evidence that's been presented. And third, despite those first 2 points, there's already been a preemptive detention. Now for Section 4. Politics in a robe, because the author's critique actually goes way beyond just legal procedure. They start to argue that this isn't really about the law anymore. It's about politics. See, the author claims this wasn't just a solo move by the ICC. They point to what they call local enablers, meaning the active cooperation of the current Philippine government. In their view, the administration basically handed over a former head of state to an international body whose authority is still being legally disputed. And to the author, that just smells of politics. And this quote, well, this is the author's knockout punch. They're arguing that when a case looks like this, detention before evidence with clear political help, it's just not a judicial process anymore. It's politics, simply dressed up in a judge's robe. And that brings us to our final section, why due process matters. This is where the author zooms out a bit to argue why this is so much bigger than just this one case. For them, it's about the core principles that hold our entire legal system together. The author's first principle is that due process isn't just a nice little feature. It's not optional, something you can just get rid of when a case is politically charged. They see it as the absolute bedrock of justice. The second principle is that a court's authority has to be concrete. The author argues that jurisdiction can't just be based on feelings or interpretation, or as they put it, vibes. It has to be clearly and legally established, period. And the final principle is really a warning. The author believes that when courts start stretching their powers, even if it's in the name of justice, they don't actually strengthen their own authority. Instead, they weaken it. They undermine the very legitimacy they need to function. And so, this whole critique leaves us with one central, really challenging question to think about. When a legal process starts to look and feel political, is it still justice? It's a question that really forces us to think hard about where that line is and what happens when it gets blurry.